Welcome to this Tutor to You AQA A-Level Sociology Paper 2 walkthrough, focusing on the optional topic of media. In this video we're going to look at how to answer a 10-mark apply and analyse question on media ownership and the selection of news. Now the 10-mark apply and analyse questions appear on all three papers and make up 40 out of the 240 marks that are available. In this video we're going to focus on a 10-mark question that may appear on a paper 2 on the optional topic of media. To answer this type of question, students need to come up with two extended paragraphs that must draw on information from the item that is presented to them. They need to take the hooks from the item, develop them by linking them to sociological concepts, and explain how they answer the question. This requires students to analyse and or evaluate the explanation that is offered. And in this example, we're going to show you examples of both analysis and evaluation that would get a student into the 8 to 10 mark band. For the purposes of this video, we've written a sample question that is similar in style to those found on the AQA A-Level Sociology Paper 2. It has an item and it has a question, and it's asking students to apply material from item M, analyse two ways in which media ownership can affect the content of news coverage. Now in this question there is also an item, and students need to draw two hooks from this item to help them to answer the question. The item states, in the UK, a small number of powerful companies control most mainstream media. These organisations may prioritise profit or push particular political agendas, shaping how news is framed and what is reported. Sociologists suggest that media ownership can affect the content of news coverage. Now it's important to note that the second paragraph here is repeating the question, and so hooks that are taken from that wouldn't be credited in an exam situation. We're looking for two hooks that we can develop and show how the ownership of the media can affect the content of news coverage. Now, I've picked out two hooks here. Firstly, prioritising profit, and we may want to develop that to show how that has an impact on news coverage. And the second one is pushing particular political agendas, showing how ownership of certain news sources will shape how news is framed and what is reported. What we need to do now is take these hooks and develop them into points that a student can use. So if we look at our first cause and effect, first we have political agendas. Now the ownership of different media sources we know will have different political biases, and therefore we can develop this point by talking about the political views of different owners. As we've seen from the item, the ownership of the media is concentrated into the hands of very few, and this means that mainstream media often reflects the political views of a very narrow subset of the population. We can look at the work of Curran and talk about how the ideals of press barons, particularly the likes of Rupert Murdoch and Lord Rothermere, have very conservative ideals, and how, generally speaking, mainstream media does have a very conservative bias. We can therefore link that into news coverage by stating that these owners will advise their editorial teams to select stories that fit in with their political agenda. And we could use examples of news media that has these type of ideals and that their political agenda reflects the viewpoint of their owners. Our second point is to prioritise profit. Now, as the media is concentrated into the hands of very few people, these people are looking to make a profit from the media sources that they have. As a consequence, they may push an agenda of infotainment, selecting more sensationalist news that will draw in viewers and increase advertising revenue. We can apply here the work of the Glasgow University Media Group, who discuss how economic factors will impact on the selection of the news. Now, the Glasgow University Media Group looked at this two ways. First of all, that it produced sensational content that would draw in a large amount of viewers and increase advertising revenue. The other way it can be looked at, as the Glasgow University Media Group did, was to suggest that owners of media are less likely to rock the boat by promoting radical stories that challenge the status quo, because this might discourage advertisers. Therefore, they're more likely to select celebrity stories and sensational content to get a large viewership, and less likely to select radical stories that may cause controversy for their advertisers. So we're going to look at a sample response here, and we're going to focus on our first point, which is pushing political agendas. One way media ownership can affect news coverage is by influencing the political bias of reporting. So we've identified our way, now we need to develop this a bit further. As item M suggests, owners may push particular political agendas, so there's our item hook. According to Curran, media in the UK is dominated by a small number of conglomerates, such as News UK, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. These owners often support certain political parties, and this affects how stories are reported. So we've explained how news coverage may have a political bias and how it may reflect the political views of owners, but we need to develop this a bit further, perhaps by using an example. For example, newspapers like The Sun and The Times have consistently supported conservative policies and leaders. We can develop this further. News stories in these outlets may frame left-wing political issues or figures negatively, while giving favourable coverage to right-wing perspectives. This suggests that news content is not neutral, but shaped by the ideological leanings of media owners, limiting the diversity of political viewpoints available to the public. So we have developed this point really well. We've shown good analysis, and we've shown how media owners with their own political views can transmit those by using examples onto the population through selection of news stories. Now we're going to add in a little evaluation, and we're going to do this from a pluralist viewpoint. However, Whale argues that owners rarely interfere in the day-to-day running of newsrooms, and that journalistic integrity means that news reporting is a reflection of journalistic values. So what Whale is saying is that it is not the owners who are setting the political agenda, but it is the journalists. And this could be further backed up, particularly if you look at the Glasgow University Media Group and how they suggested that the social class backgrounds of those working in the media will often be reflected in the content that is produced. Our second response is looking at how we can prioritise profit, which is also stated in item M. And we say a second way ownership can influence news content is through the prioritisation of profit, as also stated in item M. We need to now develop this and talk about how owners look to prioritise profit and how this is linked to the news. The media is a commercial industry, and news organisations often rely on advertising revenue. As a result, they are more likely to select news stories that will attract a larger audience and therefore are influenced by economic concerns rather than ideologies. Now, this explains how the news looks to prioritise profit, but we need to link in ownership. The Glasgow University Media Group suggests that newsrooms are motivated by profit and look to appease advertisers rather than challenging existing ideas, and so play it safe. So that we're starting to link the news into sort of like the powers that be. Furthermore, Tunstall and Palmer argue that in a profit-driven model, news stories are selected based on their ability to attract large audiences. So we're backing up the Glasgow University Media Group with the work of Tunstall and Palmer. This leads to infotainment, where sensational stories, crime, celebrity scandals and disasters are prioritised over serious or investigative journalism. Now what we need to do is link this to ownership of the media. And we've done this with a simple sentence on how the economic pressures of media ownership can influence decisions over the selection of the news. Now you'll notice there's no evaluation in here. We've used our ability to analyse to show the depth required to have a good response to this question. Now, just some exam gold here. The key to get into the higher levels of the mark scheme is to make sure that you address the different components of the question. We need to address the cause, the effect, and the process. Often what will happen in 10-mark apply and analyse questions is students will answer one part of the question without directly making links to the other parts of the question, and this can mean that they don't get into the top mark bands. That concludes this Tutor to You AQA A-Level Sociology Paper 2 walkthrough video looking at the media and how to answer a 10-mark apply and analyse question on media ownership and the selection of news coverage. Thanks for watching.